All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for us coming to our segment of Unholy Alliance. Can everyone hear me at this time? Just to make sure everyone can hear me. All right. So we had a bit of a rough start this afternoon. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for us coming to our segment of Unholy Alliance. Can everyone hear me at this time? Just to make sure everyone can hear me. All right. So we had a bit of a rough start this afternoon. All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Getting a little bit of
Thank you for us coming to our segment
on my live
of Unholy Alliance. Can everyone hear
Unshare.
me?
You gotta unshare your audio. That's coming from the YouTube that's playing in the background because you turned on the live feed.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
So just mute the YouTube transmission.
My live of Unholy Alliance.
Unshare. You gotta unshare your audio. That's coming from the YouTube that's playing in the background because you turned on the live feed. So mute that. Just mute the YouTube transmission.
Unholy Alliance.
You gotta unshare your audio. That's coming from the YouTube that's playing in the background because you turned on the live feed. So mute that. Just mute the YouTube transmission.
All right, hold on.
That's coming from the YouTube that's playing.
You can hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I don't have the live feedback. All right, hold on.
You just shared your screen, though. That's all.
I just killed the screen?
No, you shared your screen. We're seeing your screen, your desktop now.
All right.
There we go. Now we're good.
All right. So there we go. All right. So we got the live show. Okay. So welcome to our segment of Unholy Alliance. Today we're going to talk about the narcissist, the codependent. Hold on a minute. Oh, Lord. There we go. We're going to talk about the narcissist. We're going to talk about the codependent. We're going to talk about toxic masculinity, which has been a topic in the news today. And we heard it thrown all around. And a lot of people don't actually know what toxic masculinity means and what it means to men, right? So we're going to talk about that today. And we're going to talk about the union of the unholy alliance. And I'm also going to give you an example of what a toxic relationship is. And we're going to talk about pathological loneliness and love addiction. All right. So entering into the segment. Could somebody mute? Could y'all mute your microphones, please? Thank you. And upon saying that, we have a couple speakers that are in the house tonight that are going to share what they're going to share their experiences and talk about the questions that they have about narcissism, which is really, I think it's really going to be special, especially coming from them on their perspective of what narcissism is. All right. So getting into narcissism, right? Narcissism came from the word Narcissus, right? Narcissus was a Greek mythology legend about a young man who was very beautiful and was a hunter in Greek mythology. And as he was walking through a woods, a young lady fell in love with him. And she ran up to him to get his attention. But upon her running up to him to get his attention and she tried to hug him, he pushed her away. He disdained her, right? He didn't like people hugging up on him, and he didn't even like to pay people attention that liked him. And so with that, she roamed the forest and she withered away, and all that you heard was an echo. Upon that, the goddess nymph, the story goes, she looked, and for retribution, she learned of what happened, and she led him to the pool to fall in love with his own reflection. Upon learning that it was on his own reflection, he looked at it and became very depressed and despair because his material reflection could not materialize, right? So he ended up living a world of eternal depression and ultimately committed suicide. So this is where we get the word narcissism from, right? It's a very self-centered person. Looking at the definition of narcissist, Psychologists characterize it as narcissism as by a person being grandiose, sense of self, importance, a lack of caring or having empathy for others. Needless to say, he has less admiration for people, very high belief in himself, and believe that he holds a special place in the world, and people should recognize him as being unique and a beautiful creature, which exemplifies the story of Narcissus, if you look at it, right? It falls into that definition. There's another definition that Dr. Ramney Drusilova gave, and I'm gonna just refer to her as Dr. Ramney because her last name is very difficult to pronounce. She said narcissist is a person who has a long-standing problem of not having empathy and feeling of grandiose being entitled. Hello, can you turn that on? Yeah, thank you. All right. Oh, sorry about that. Along to having a feeling of grandiose being entitled, superficial, constantly seeking admiration, validation, cannot tolerate frustration and disappointment, has a tendency to explode in rages, and tends to be dishonest and very controlling. We're going to look at the manipulation tool of the narcissist, which is gaslighting, and how it affects a person in a relationship, which is very destructive. Once I learned of it, I learned how destructive gaslighting could be to someone. According to Dr. Romney, 80% of men are narcissists and 20% of them are women. According to the village mental health clinic, 75% of the people have narcissistic personality disorder, which are men. And according to the Science Daily, it tends to be men who have the narcissistic personality disorder. So as we can see, this is a heavily male-based personality disorder that's going on, and it's linked to domestic violence and a whole bunch of other things. So as we get into it, right, we look that we have what we call the Diagnostic Statistic Manual. In the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, there are 10 behavioral disorders, and each of them are characterized in the cluster A, cluster B, and the cluster C. We are looking at the cluster B personalities, which is one of the most destructive personalities that they have. And these people, for them, there is no cure except for at least one, right? So we have anti-personality disorder, we have borderline disorder, we have histrionic, which is a person who is very dramatic, who lacks empathy, who doesn't care about nobody. And as we're dealing with the narcissist right now. So these are your cluster B personality disorders, right? So from your cluster B personality disorders, they're characterized as people being overly dramatic, emotional, or unpredictable in thinking or behavior. Often they have difficulties maintaining healthy relationships, right? And just a short note, our subject today of who we're going to characterize and who I'm going to give the example of is, if everybody looked at the movie Why Did I Get Married by Tyler Perry, there is a couple in there. There's 4 couples that's going to Colorado. And there's a particular couple that personifies this narcissistic personality disorder and codependency. And you have Mike, which is Richard T. Jones, and you have Sheila, who is Jill Scott, right? And at the outset of it, we're gonna character build on Mike's personality and see how he falls into the line of being a narcissist, right? And when you look, these people are categorized as they're very impulsive, self-destructive, emotional behavior, and sometimes incomprehensible interaction with others. As you look at the opening of the movie, when you look at Mike and Sheila enter the plane, and Mike is sitting down with her friend, and Sheila has to sit in the front. Now, Sheila is overly conscious about her weight. And by her being overly conscious about her weight, he makes her sit by herself, and she encompasses 2 seats. He gives her some money, and he tells her to ride to the location to meet us, and obstinately makes fun of how she looks. and has no care or consideration for how she feels or how she may have felt having to drive alone all the way about, I believe it was about 6 hours or 7 hours to Colorado. And not only that, the roads was dangerous, and at the outset, he cared nothing about it. He showed no empathy. So this is a person who is exhibiting narcissistic behavior. Not only that, but he's putting down other people to make himself feel good, right? So this is the character buildup, and this is the exact personification of what narcissist people do to people in relationships. And why is it so destructive? Because it takes down the person's self-esteem, right? All right, let's keep going further. Narcissists at the high end of the spectrum can have a disorder known as narcissistic personality disorder. Now, here's where it is. The personality disorder has to be a long-standing problem that destroys the person's life all throughout the spectrums of their life, in school, relationships. And not only that, but the person suffers because they are unable to hold healthy relationships. That's where the personality disorder, it's a long-standing disorder, right? Has to be long-standing. Or unless it's just a person who is just exhibiting narcissistic behavior, but it doesn't destroy their lives. Okay, so now we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that further in the discussion. So any narcissist can be confronted with the truth. They hate to be confronted with the truth, and they also hate to be ridiculed. They always like to be considered that. They always like to consider themselves as geniuses. They like to consider themselves as very high level elite, and they crumble at the facts of what they actually are, right? And when we look at the story with Mike and Sheila, if you look at towards the end of the story, when she found somebody else and she looked happy, he was very upset. All his insecurities came out. Even though he thought he had what he wanted Sheila back. And it's not because he just wanted Sheila back. He wanted to control her again because she made him feel good. She made him feel like he was the center of her life, right? Trina didn't do that for him. Trina pushed him away. Trina had boundaries. And for any narcissist, a person who stands on their own, who believes in themselves, it presents a problem to them. They only go with people who lack self-esteem and need a person who needs to serve others. But we're going to get into the codependency part of it just in a few minutes. One thing that makes a person with a narcissistic personality or so dangerous is their willingness to use people, right? So one thing we see about Mike was his willingness to use people for either to control Sheila or to destroy her image of herself. And what he did was, by using her friend and committing that infidelity, he destroyed her, not only her friendship, but he used Trina to destroy any sense of self-worth that Sheila had left about herself, right? Because Trina was the last thing that she was holding on to as a real friend in a destructive relationship where she didn't think much of herself, but she thought a person that thought much of her, and she considered that person who thought much of her as to be a friend, valued her opinion. Anytime you value somebody's opinion and you're at the low point of your life, you find it that at a point when you come to it is that the person who you thought was there for you, the last string has been destroyed. Sheila was totally destroyed. All right, so one thing that they are is they are manipulators, right? So a narcissist is a manipulator. And it does this because it gives them a boost of self-confidence, right? Unfortunately, it's a false self-confidence that they had that leaves them feeling empty and short after a while. So they have to keep doing it in order to get that boost of confidence that they have. So they will perpetually use a person in order to make themselves feel good because of the lack because of their own insecurities and vulnerabilities that they have inside of them. Next thing that you know about a narcissist is that they're very sensitive, right? If you ridicule a narcissist or you insult a narcissist, they will strike with rage and precision about the things that hurt you the most. And if you looked at that movie, and I use it as a reference so that you can get an example of what a narcissist is and what they do and how they strike back when you strike at them, and how they will hurt you at your look, and they'll take the things that's personally in your life and use it to hurt you. At the table where they was discussing marriages, when he was exposed, he exposed the deepest secrets of all his friends and destroyed their marriages, right? And at the point is, so you realize that he didn't have to do that. He was already exposed because he was already there with the woman. They knew what was going on. He didn't have to out his best friends, but he did that because his ego was struck and he struck back at them, right? So a person who has a narcissistic personality disorder is very sensitive, and they're going to strike you at your weakest point in your life. So you have to be very careful. That's what makes them so dangerous. They will use your personal things against you, right? Not only that they're quick to strike, they have a very thin veneer drape of constant self-doubt. So that thin level of criticism or any attempt to stand up to them is instantly met with rage, anger, and aggression. The reason narcissists work so hard for special treatment and for pedestals to stand on and being adored by the people is because of their insecurity. Now, they said that any person with a grandiose temperament at the end of the spectrum is depressed. And any person that is depressed has fantasies of being in a grandiose predicament, right? So, as you can see where the narcissist stand, narcissist alone is a person in deep self-hate and true sadness. A narcissist deepest motive is never letting anyone know how insecure they feel. Narcissists also work hard to look good at any level, right? They seek attention at all costs, right? So attention for a narcissist is very important. It is their bread and butter, right? They look for attention and they will do anything to seek attention. That's why they seek to insult people and laugh and ridicule people and abuse people, especially the ones who is taking care of them and who is treating them good. They have no empathy or they have no care or concern for how that person feels. That's why when Sheila was crying when she left the plane because she was overweight and she couldn't ride and she would have to pay for 2 seats, he just laughed at her and made fun of the thing that she was very sensitive about. The friend now said, "Now let's go with her." He said, "No, let's sit down here. She'll take care of herself and let her go by herself." This is a prime example of narcissistic behavior, not only extreme narcissistic behavior. Again, they won't do anything if no one will see them. The narcissist wants to ensure that they have an audience, even a small one, before they do any favor. That's key. Their relationships exist to make them look good and no one else. Their thin veneer of false sense of self-confidence can come crumbling down at any moment. The problem is that their confidence and the wall that they have is so thin, it could be destroyed at any moment. That's why it's met with such rage and aggression, right? And because of that, they have to have complete control in the relationship so that you don't attack them or attack their insecurities. So before you get a chance in the relationship to show who you are, they'll destroy who you are so that you don't feel comfortable attacking them. Now, narcissists rarely consider the long-term consequences of their actions, particularly when they have to do with other emotions. If your date ends in tears, the narcissist wouldn't care too much and he wouldn't even think about it. The important thing is that he's left right and you being wrong, or he's left feeling good and you're feeling bad. He doesn't care about the other person's emotions. Again, when you look at it, it's a strong personality disorder that's maladaptive form of behavior that cuts through all situations of the person's life, relationships, social functioning, and this personality disorder causes major consistent problems for the person. That's the consistent diagnosis of a person that has personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. Now, I'm going to call on one of my participants here to speak and share their question and how they feel about what we just said about narcissistic personality disorder. So Shayna, if you could speak and say your part, you know what I mean, and talk your question and let us know how you feel about it. Your speaker. There you go. We can't hear you, Shayna. All right. When you get it together, Shayna, we'll come back to you. No problem. All right. So when you look at it, there's narcissism on a macro level, right? So when you look at it, as far as cultures and black sheeps and all these type of things, all these things represents the people who are punishing these people in the narcissistic environment. So let's look at it this way. Your marginalized communities are the people who are being oppressed by a narcissistic community. When you look at the genocide in Europe of the Jews, that was a narcissistic person who did that, right? When you look at when you look at Rosewood, if you all seen the movie Rosewood, that's a narcissistic oppression. The Black Wall Street was another narcissistic oppression, right? When you look today with the anti-vax and the vax people, the vax pressuring the people into doing this, that's another narcissistic approach. Without people understanding the real causes and the effects of the vaccine, people are already making decisions and attacking people for what they should and shouldn't do. People are losing their jobs. All of this is narcissistic oppression of a society, right? Now, when you look at it again, you have the patriarchy. So the patriarch is the male dominance in a culture. When you look at unequal pay for women, that's when you look at when women couldn't vote, that's another one, right? So these are narcissistic behaviors of individuals who are oppressing people. So narcissistic on a macro level is the oppression of people. Hello? All right. Narcissistic is the oppression of people, right, in a culture or marginalized communities. That's it on a macro level. We're going to talk more about that when we talk about toxic masculinity, because toxic masculinity speaks to all these things that I'm just telling you right now. Right now, I'm just giving you a preparation and letting you see how you just don't look at it as in a relationship, but you can look at it as in a whole different standing and see how narcissistic views has oppressed a lot of people in the culture. You ready, Shayna? All right, let's try it again. Speak.
Hi, everyone. You hear me now? Okay. All right. Today, I will be sharing with you the suicide rates for a narcissist And is narcissist common in domestic violence relationships? So narcissist personality disorder is associated with a greater risk of suicide death when compared to other personality disorders. Some narcissistic patients will die by suicide, but others can improve their vulnerability with the help of a long-term psychotherapy geared to enhancing their self-esteem and increasing their capacity to mentalize the internal processes of the patient. Suicidal wishes are not rare in those with narcissistic personality disorder. However, the factors contributing to suicide among narcissistic individuals are not well understood. As stated by Paul Links, he pointed out that with patients on the narcissistic spectrum, the wish to kill oneself can emerge without the presence of a depressed state. Indeed, suicidal feelings may outgrow of a desperate need to regulate self-esteem or protect a pathological self-image of perfection. In addition, an acute narcissistic injury can produce intense shame to the point where suicide seems like the only option. Whereas guilty individuals may feel they are not living up to a standard, shame-prone patients, such as vulnerable narcissists, have the sense of being irreparably defective. Shame is sometimes defined as a sense of falling short of what one should be. Shame is often at one core of narcissistic individuals who struggle with an acute sense of having failed in many aspects of their lives. They feel certain that others are thinking badly about them. When caught by someone watching them, a sense of painful humiliation may emerge. Seeing and being seen are central to narcissistic patients. They may feel that their secret sense of being phony or fake is now exposed. Suicide may feel like their only way out, especially after a devastating humiliation. It is not well recognized, but suicidal behavior is a clinically significant but underestimated cause of mortality in narcissistic personality disorder. In a sample of 446 suicide attempters, patients with a cluster B narcissistic personality disorder diagnosis were compared in terms of expected lethality and impulsivity. This rigorous investigation showed that subjects with MPD were less impulsive but had a higher lethality than those without MPD. Running-Stam pointed out that narcissistic patients are at high risk for committed suicides or highly lethal attempts without warning signs or self-disclosures. Approximately 1 in every 10 people are walking around without a conscience, or at best lacks empathy. According to the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the prevalence in the general population for antisocial personality disorder is estimated at 3.3%, and the prevalence of narcissistic personality disorder is as high as 6%. There are approximately 325 million people in the US, and 6% of them have narcissistic personality disorder, which equals 19,560,000 people. If each of those people narcissistically abuse just 5 people during their lives, that amounts to an additional 95.8 million people. In some domestic violence relationships, there are warning signs of narcissistic abuse. Narcissistic abuse can simmer just below the surface. This kind of abuse can be difficult to identify and discuss openly. It may not even occur to a person that they are experiencing abuse from a narcissistic partner. Narcissistic abusers can be extremely charming on the outside, making it impossible for others to think they can be abusing you behind closed doors. If you are in a relationship with a narcissist, they are prone to love bombing, where they bombard you with gifts, compliments, and over-the-top gestures that completely sweeps you off of your feet.